Hello everybody, Steve here, and today I want to talk about something a little different than my last few videos. When I first started doing these videos, I wanted to, the idea was to start kind of going over the process that it took for me to, as I started lockpicking, and things I learned and on the way and things that helped me out. And so I did a little bit of an introduction on how I got started, and then I talked. Then I talked a little bit about sloppiness and tolerances and stuff, and so I ended up getting a little sidetracked lately and doing other videos on lockpicking and stuff like that. But so today I wanted to kind of approach another subject that when I first started lockpicking, it kind of had to learn exactly what people were talking about. There's a certain kind of lingo in the lock sport where we say different things and you kind of like, what the heck are they talking about, and you kind of have to learn the lingo a little bit. So one of the things that I started hearing right off was, oh, that lock has pretty good bidding, and that's pretty flat, and this is has a lot of highs and lows, and there's a high lift in the back, blah blah blah. And at first I'm like, what the heck are they talking about? And I'm like, oh, I realize what bidding was. Obviously, the bidding is when you look at the key, you have the bidding of the key, which has where the key is cut in order to set each key pin in the lock. So, for example, in one of these clear locks, you can definitely see where some of the pins are down lower than others, especially over here, where you can see some of the driver pins are set down farther than other ones, and that's because the bidding on the key, with the highs and lows, the key pins are different sizes, and so it makes it so that it does that. So this video is going to focus on why that bidding matters. So first of all, when we hear the term, oh, that bidding has pretty flat bidding, the best way to look at it is this lock has, let's get something over here to kind of see the key. You see how that bidding, basically it's all cut really high and doesn't, there's not too much of a variation between each pin and stuff, and so that would be something that would be called flat bidding. And obviously this is kind of barely cut into the key, where each bidding is barely cut in. You can see this one is barely just a slight little cut in there, so that's pretty high flat bidding. And so this lock goes with that. It's kind of hard to see in this clear plastic lock. This one's kind of a little harder to see, but you can see how these key pins, or these driver pins up here, are pretty much almost the same. And when I insert the key, they barely even go anywhere. That's because, yeah, the bidding is flat, but it's really high. So it doesn't even look like it's doing anything. So another example is this one. This isn't too bad. Has a little bit of high there. Keep going off into this side. So this is pretty high there, but then you have some lows. So I mean, it's still kind of flat, but you can see how there is a little bit of highs and lows and variation, and you can definitely see it in this clear plastic lock. Where when you insert the key and everything goes to the shear line, how there's how that can play into part. So one of the best examples I have on the table with these clear plastic locks is this one right here. So this is keyed up there. Let's see if we can see it really well. You can kind of see it. Let's see if I can get closer. Oh, okay, there we go. So you can see how on this side of the lock, how that bitting is way different than this side. Obviously the two sides are keyed differently. So this one, you have a lot of these driver pins are pretty high and these ones are pretty low. And on this side you have some that are high here, some low, then it goes back up high. So this is the key for this side. Well, let's see. Yeah, that's for this side. I can prove it. Yeah, see, that's for this side. And the other key is for the other side. So let's take a closer look at this. So here's the key for this side, and you can see how when you can kind of line up the key bitting with the driver pins in there, you can kind of see them, and you can see how those highs and lows are in direct correlation to how high and low those driver pins are. So let's switch over to the other side, and you can see that. Look at that difference. So what does that mean when we're talking about trying to pick this lock? Well, as you can see, since this bitting is really high and it has shorter, that would mean it would have shorter key pins, and so then the driver pins, even though all the driver pins on this lock are all the same size, and most locks, the driver pins are basically the same size. There are some that are different size. Driver pins are different sizes, but just for basic reference, you can kind of pretty much bet that the driver pins are all going to be about the same size. And so that means that since the key pins are shorter, that these driver pins sit down into the lock, into the core a lot more. And the driver pins are what really binds up the core. And so, excuse me, so when we have these pins that are really high, that means we have to lift that pin a lot higher than we do these pins over here. And so you can see how low those are cut, and see how, because these are cut low, then the correlation is that the key pin is going to be a lot longer, and then the driver pin is not going to sit down in the core as much. And so then therefore you don't have to push these pins up. Sometimes they can be cut so low that they don't then, and the key pins are so long that it's almost like you don't even have to pick them. You might even just touch them, and then they go to the shear line. So that is the biggest difference on why it kind of matters on this size. And so they're like, oh yeah, that's nice. I mean, I just have to push that one up higher and that one up lower, and no big deal. Well, the problem comes when you're trying to use, say you're trying to use a really flat hook or something like that to push it up, kind of like this one is. I mean, this has a little bit on there, but it's, it's not really deep. It's basically a short hook. This is a Peterson short hook, and so it is designed to lift these pins, and it can't, obviously when you're in there and pushing it, you can't lift them up too high because of the shorter hook. And this will work in a lot of cases, even in something like this, but you end up running into a problem where if these higher pins are in the back and these are in the front, then you end up having what happens is as you insert the pick in here and you sit here, and if you work from back to front, then you're pushing up these ones and you're barely touching them. They go to shear line, then you go up here, and if you, depending on where you're pushing from or rocking from, if you're trying to push it up by hand, or then you can end up oversetting these pins you already set because you're trying to push these ones up and back. And see how the shank of the hook can actually push those pins, and you end up oversetting the pins in front. And so that's where the biggest difference, where the biggest thing is why, you know, why a lot of people say, hey, you know, I have a lot of highs in the back or whatever, and so it makes it really hard because then I'm trying to go around that pin, and and even something like this master lock, and this is, you can see how, you know, simple lock, but if you try to pick this one here, then you're fine, but you may not even touch this one because of, like I said in a video before, because of the sloppiness. You might not even have to worry about touching it because the tolerance, the sloppiness might be off so much that it might be to shear already. But then when you try to lift up here, if you don't have the right kind of hook, then you end up oversetting the other pin. I had one lock that I sent to somebody where it was kind of flat there at the beginning, so up front it was kind of flat and lower cuts, and then it had one higher cut one in the back, and I could actually end up taking a Peterson gem, putting it in there, and just basically lift up in just the right way, and I can push all the key pins up to the shear line and pop the lock open very quickly. So I mean, that can definitely matter. Another issue comes when you are trying to pick one where you have the higher cut right there at the beginning. See how this lock, bring my background back up, so you can see how this one has some lower cuts here inside the lock, and you have this higher one here, and you have some of these lower ones, and then you have another higher one right up front of the lock. And so that also becomes an issue, because what ends up happening is as you try to insert the pick in here, you're actually trying to lift up and really trying to get to that eye pin. I can kind of demonstrate. See how if I get right on that first pin there and I'm trying to lift it up, see how far I have to push the lock down? I guess I better stay in frame, but anyway, how far I have to push this pick up and how much of an angle it is, and and sometimes, and if you try to push it up like this, sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. But if you try to do this, and then it gets very difficult to get up there, and you're like, oh, come on, go, and then you finally get it to go. So that's another thing that makes it fun, makes it hard. So anyway, I just wanted to do a quick video on what the bitting was and what I learned about it and why it matters so much, so that it can make the lock, because of the bitting, it can make the lock a lot harder or easier depending. I mean, you can have the lock, two different locks, exactly the same kind of driver pins in both of them and stuff, and then just because the pitting might be different, then it can make the lock a lot harder or easier than other ones. So I have this other master lock here, and they're both different bittings. One's very flat and the other one's kind of, oh, dropped those keys. You can see how flat that one is compared to this one. And so just because both of those locks are both 4-pin and both master lock number 3s, one is going to be a little bit more difficult than the other to pick. And and sometimes if you, one nice thing I like about just buying a lock where you can't see the key, or getting a lock in the mail or from somebody, you you don't know what the bidding is and you can't decide, and so it makes it makes it more interesting in learning how to pick the locks. And so anyway, I just wanted to kind of explain a few things on how when I first started lock picking, what I found out about the bidding, and what I realized not too long afterwards on why the bidding really matters to me. And sometimes if you want a little bit more challenge, then definitely go for something where the bidding is different like this. You will notice that if you get some challenge locks, you'll notice that a lot of times the bidding is really really out there, where there's a lot of highs and lows and trying to reach up behind things and stuff, and sometimes it can even catch your pick in there and get it stuck and you can't get it out, and people end up breaking picks like that. There's one lock, I think it was called a pick eater, because it would do that, and I know sometimes when I reach in there, I might have pin 4 that's really down low, and I'm trying to reach under that and get to pin 5, or reach under pin 5 to get to pin 6 in order to get that last pin lifted up to shear. So anyway, just depending on what your challenge is, obviously I talked about the lock that was, it was a harder lock, and I had a couple of them, and one was harder than the other, and I ended up giving the easier one away because it just wasn't too much of a challenge anymore. I just see how fast I could open it up, basically. And then sometimes I've even gone in the store to look for a lock, and I'm looking at all the keys that I could see, and I'm looking for something that, whether depending on the mood I'm in, whether I want to get something easy or hard. So anyway, I think this video's gone on long enough. I tend to ramble on a little while and kind of make these videos a little too long, I think, sometimes. But anyway, thank you very much for sticking with me and watching this to the end. And this is basically why, to me, the bidding really matters to me, whether I want a challenge or not, or whatever. So thank you very much for watching, and make sure you leave a comment down below. I'd love to hear your comments, and I try to respond to everybody. And if you do like this video, please give a like and make sure you subscribe. And thank you very much for watching, and have a wonderful day.